Mine. Let's see if I can. Okay, here's the broadcast. All right, let's see if it will let you in now. All right, we're live. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our panel discussion, The Importance of Diversity on the Bench. This is a very important topic, and I'm so glad that we have such an esteemed panel here with us tonight that can present to you some information that's going to be very helpful to you in terms of how you can support your local community by voting and making sure that you're paying attention to those very important elections that you may not think have anything to do with you. So tonight's theory is just an attempt to educate you on the importance of diversity on the bench. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and introduce my panelists for tonight. I want to go through each of them, and then I'm going to allow them to give a brief introduction of themselves. Tonight we have Judge Bettieanne Hart. Judge Hart is a former Superior Court judge from the Augusta Superior Court. We are so welcome to have her, thankful to have her here with us tonight. I also have Gail Slaton, who is an attorney and a native of Newton County. Stephanie Lindsey of the Lindsey Firm, PC, native of Newton County, trial litigator. We're thankful to have her here tonight. I have Kevin Gooch, who is a partner with DLA Piper and also a native of Newton County. Michael Geoffroy of MG Law. Hi, Michael. He is also a resident of Newton County. Wayne Kendall is here by phone. Can you say hello, Wayne?
Hello.
Wayne has been a trial attorney for over 40 years, and he is a member of Advocacy for Action. So he is definitely an expert on the topic tonight. And last but not least, Navan Ward, who is of Beasley, Allen. Navan has been practicing for over 20 years now, Navan?
Right around 20.
And he is the president-elect for AAJ, American Association for Justice. So without further ado, I will allow Judge Hart to give a brief introduction.
Hello, I'm so thankful and grateful to be here tonight in the midst of all of the things that we are going that we have going on in this country, and I know in our personal lives. I am a former judge. I was elected to the bench in the Augusta Judicial Circuit, which was the first time we had a black woman elected to, appointed to the bench in a circuit that was outside of Atlanta. It was not necessarily one of my goals, but I came to the bench from a political background, having been elected as a state representative for 2 terms. I became very aware of the significance of the bench when I was sitting there in terms of the kinds of issues that had to be decided, and aware of the dearth of black judges across the state. If you are not actively practicing or seeing cases only when you have to come in front of a judge, you really aren't aware. But once you get into the arena where you are among the bench, you become very sensitive to the fact that there are just a few and how large this state is. And as a result of my experiences in Augusta, I became one of the founders of Advocacy for Action because of our awareness of how the appointment process was working, especially in Fulton County, and how we were losing ground. And I think having run a judicial race and having been aware of how judges talk and what they think and the whole sphere of that particular arena within the law field, I became very sensitive to, and I'm still sensitive to, what is happening in our state and what is happening in our nation, and how that may be one missing piece in the judicial system. We have a lot of emphasis now on district attorney races. We have a lot of emphasis on police officials, and we really don't have the emphasis that we need on judges. And judges are, in fact, elected by and large. They are appointed in Georgia, but we have a constitution that provides that they be elected. And so that's the vantage point from which I come. I've also practiced law for well over 40 years, so I've seen it from all.
Thank you, Judge Hart. Now move on to Gail Slaton, Attorney Gail Slaton.
Yes, first, good evening, everyone, and thank you, LeKeyia, for putting this together. Just quickly, I am a native of Newton County. I currently live in Newton County, so I'm a resident of Newton County, live here, and I am a licensed attorney, and actually just recently went back to my earlier roots of federal employment, back to labor and employment relations for a federal agency here in Atlanta. So I've left trial practice. But certainly as someone who is from Newton County, I'm very vested in what happens in our county, and just as an attorney in the state, period, very concerned about how we select our judges, the considerations that are made, and certainly want to help inform our local community and the local circuit, and particularly about considerations that we need to keep in mind, particularly as we seek to fill some upcoming vacancies.
Thank you. All right, Stephanie Lindsey.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Lindsey, and I am an attorney at the Lindsey Firm. I haven't been practicing as long as some others. I've only been practicing, this year will be 2 years, well, excuse me, 20 years in November, 220. You know, they all run together anyway. And I am a resident here in Newton County. I've been here in Newton County for forever. So I feel like a native. I feel like I was born and raised here. And I'm definitely thankful that this has been put together so that we can have a discussion about the Alcovy circuit, not only the circuit, but just the bench itself in general, and the need for diversity on the bench. So thanks for putting this together.
Thank you. Kevin Gooch.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm glad to be a part of this panel. I am a Newton graduate. I'm a Palmerstone Elementary, Old Cousins Middle School, Newton High, and I went to Oxford College of Emory University. So I spent a lot of time out there in Oxford and Covington. I am now a partner at DLA Piper. I am a corporate attorney focusing on finance transactions, so helping people put deals together and pay for them. And I'm just glad to be here with you tonight. I'm also the chairman of the 100 Black Men of Atlanta, Inc. And of course, love Newton County. My family's still out there. And so very happy to be a part of this important conversation at this moment. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Michael Geoffroy.
Hey, thank you for having me, LeKeyia. I'm just a lunch pail attorney right here in Covington. I'm originally from Rockdale County, Conyers, one town over. But I've been here in the county for 17 years and really think that there are a lot of important issues facing our community and throughout Georgia and the country. Diversity and social justice and civil rights are at the top of the list for everybody. So I feel like as lawyers, we have an obligation to be involved in our communities and to make sure that when it comes to the bench, as Judge Hart was talking about before, and district attorneys or other elected positions that people are less familiar with than they may be a mayor or something else like that, it's a responsibility on all of us to work with the community and help folks understand how important it is. So I appreciate you putting this together.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Wayne Kendall, who is joining us by phone tonight.
Thank you for having me, LeKeyia. Sorry I wasn't able to get all the technical difficulties worked out with the visual. But I am an attorney in Georgia, been practicing law here for 40 years. I'm originally from Griffin, Georgia, grew up there, left there, went to Howard University and Georgetown Law School, came back, and I've been practicing here in Georgia ever since. I've been in private practice for all but 1 year of my 40 years of practicing law. I joined Advocacy for Action right after it was formed about 5 or 6 years ago. And we started in earnest seeking to diversify the judiciary in the state of Georgia by advocating for more minorities and women judges. And over that period of time, I think we've had some modest successes. Hadn't come without some controversy and adversity, starting with the fact that we had to sue the Judicial Nominating Commission almost from the beginning just to get the data as to who was applying and how many folks they were actually putting on the bench that were minorities. One of the things that we learned or have learned since then is that minorities are grossly underrepresented on the bench in the state of Georgia. And we can talk about that in more detail later, but that's my background and why I'm here tonight.
Thank you. And last but not least, Navan Ward.
Thank you, LeKeyia, and I echo everyone else in allowing me to be a part of this panel. I'm likely I'm not qualified to be a part of this panel. I'm not from here. I'm a Chicago boy. And after practicing for a few years, I found myself here, opening up our office, our extended office, Beasley, Allen, here in Georgia for the last 4 years, where we handle unsafe product liability cases around the country, and a lot of them here in Georgia. As you mentioned earlier, I'm the president-elect of the American Trial Lawyers, American Association for Justice. And in that capacity, one of the things that we are focused on extremely is balancing the bench. I'm not sure how many people have recognized or realized, but is what we've seen on a local level with the imbalance of and the racial disparity of judges has, unfortunately, over the last 3 years, has been really, quite frankly, a travesty. And with 100 new judges or judge openings on the federal bench at the beginning of the next administration. We are very interested in being able to, if a particular candidate happens to be the current one, person in office, we want to really push an agenda to be able to get more fair, balanced, and diverse judges on the bench across the country, because right now, for our lifetime, 27 to 28% of the judges that have been elected appointed on the federal bench over the last 3 years probably or don't share some of the same values as the people in our community. And that certainly has to change. And so, being able to talk about judges, both on a local and federal level, is something that's very important. And I'm, again, glad that you have brought this to the forefront.
Thank you. And this, like I stated before, this is an issue, as Navan stated, that plagues the entire state, not just on a local level, but on a federal level as well. And in light of Judge Johnson's death, I felt that this was a very important topic, considering the fact that he was the first and only African-American Superior Court judge in the Alcoa Circuit. So I felt that it was very important for the community to understand that and understand what we're losing here when he left the bench unexpectedly. So that's why we're here tonight. We want to just bring it to the forefront and allow the community to understand the importance of this topic. So I'll go ahead and start with our first question. Why should the community care about who is appointed to local, superior, state, appellate, supreme, or federal courts? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I've never been to jail. Why should I care about this topic? Navan Ward, can you please address that first question for us?
Sure. When I was in law school, I had the pleasure of meeting the great Johnny Cochran. He came and spoke to our college, and as long ago as that was, one thing that really stuck in my head, the title of his message was The Color of Justice, and the principle of what he was articulating was that the justice system has three legs: the judicial leg, the prosecution leg, and the defense, and how the resources that both the judicial and the prosecutor arm has so woefully more resources than the typical defense arm of it. And although we can always say that we would never ever kill somebody or rape somebody or do any other thing that would land us behind bars, we can almost guarantee that in most instances, but we can't guarantee that we will be accused of that. And if we're accused of it, we're in a situation, many of the people in our community are faced with the situation of being in a position of having, and at that point in time, he had pulled out an article that showed that federal defenders have about $600-700 to mount a defense. And he appropriately talked about how $600-700 would not have covered lunch for the first 2 or 3 days of many of his trials, let alone being able to get the type of evidence that you might need to make sure that you aren't behind jail. And so, because we may not commit crimes or think we'll commit crimes, people in our community on an everyday basis, either for victim of circumstances, have to go before judges, or we have to go before judges mistakenly. And if people who are making rulings have completely different life experiences than you do, and have not taken the time to learn about the problems, issues, and challenges that people in your community face, then they can't possibly understand or empathize with the people in the community that you come from. And so that leads to, say, my cousin, who I can guarantee is a good kid, who happened to hang around the wrong crowd on one occasion, and that's led to him having an 8 to 10 year sentence in the federal penitentiary, while that same judge and judges around the nation and here in Georgia, we constantly see allow white defendants with much less crimes and much greater crimes or equal crimes are given less sentences and less time for these, again, same crimes. And so those are reasons, in my estimation, that we have to care who's on the bench. They have to know and experience, have some frame of reference of your experience, because I guarantee you they have the frame of reference of the experience of the white kid who they can understand is good, inherently good, and the reason why they get much less sentence, if not anything.
Thank you. And Wayne Kendall, would you like to chime in on that matter?
Yes. One of the reasons we always give at Advocates of Action for why the judges matter is that the average individual is more likely to come into contact with a judge than he or she is to come into contact with, let's say, a state legislator or what a state legislator does, or what a state senator does, or what a person in the Congress might do. You're more likely to be affected by the behavior of a judge than you are by anyone that's in the legislative branch. Yet and still more people know about legislators and their capabilities and their policies than they do about judges. And that's one of the things that we have tried to cover, that is the knowledge gap. I get calls all the time from people who want to know, who is this person that's running for Superior Court judge? That person running for Superior Court judge is more likely to affect their family, their friends, their acquaintances in their everyday life than someone who's running for state senate or as a state representative. So therefore, judges are important, and in many cases more important than members of the legislative branch or even the executive branch for that matter. So judges matter, and the public should be more aware of what judges do and why they are important. And it's our responsibilities as lawyers to make them aware.
Thank you. And Kevin Gooch, I know that you're the president of 100 Black Men of Atlanta, and I'm assuming that with your functions at that particular organization, these are some of the types of things that you're trying to prevent or educate our young men about as well. Would you be willing to offer some of your advice on this subject?
Absolutely. So I'll echo what the other gentleman said. But for me, we have 3 co-equal branches of government, and we spend billions of dollars to elect a president, and we spend hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to elect folks to Congress, but people don't realize or think about always the importance of the judges, right? The judges are there to interpret the law. So you can have a candidate that is your perfect candidate that can push and pass laws that you think are perfect, but if the judges don't think that those laws are constitutional, you've wasted all your money on this politician to get these laws passed. And so it is very, very, very important to educate the community that it's not just about the politicians, it's not just about the president, but that judges really do matter. And as they interpret these laws, of course, they interpret them through the prism of their experiences and their understanding. And so it is very important to make sure that you have a diverse group of these judges that has the experience and understanding of a variety of different folks in society, not just one set of viewpoints. And so that's why it is incredibly important to focus on our judges and make sure that we have good quality judges from different backgrounds that can apply justice in a fair manner, making sure that they have that sort of grace and understanding that just because someone doesn't look like me, I shouldn't dehumanize them or view them differently or view them as sort of the enemy, but they apply that grace when they are interpreting the law and applying it to certain situations. And so it is very, very important for the general community at large to think about those judges and focus on those judges, because it is an integral part of our political system, right? I had one of my members once say that, you know, we hear a lot of times that people say the political system doesn't work for us. And he said, but have we read the instruction manual? And I think the judiciary is an important component of that instruction manual to make sure that the political system works for us.
Thank you. All right, my next question. Currently, what are some of the important legal issues facing our community? And when I say our community, I want to hone in on the Alcovey Circuit, Newton County, and Walton County. Attorney Lindsey, can you chime in on that matter for us?
There's so many, but I'm going to start with some of the things that I've experienced in the last, I would say, 2 months in the court system. And, you know, I'm just going to just say it because that's what I do. Mental illness. I mean, we got a major issue, and it stems from so many different things. It stems from genetics. It stems from, you know, just your environment and the stresses that you experience. And it stems from something else. And that's what I've been experiencing is that a lot of the cannabis-induced psychosis. I don't know if you have heard of that before, but it is real. Cannabis-induced psychosis basically is people that are taking in cannabis that has synthetic materials in it. It's not pure cannabis. I know I shouldn't say that, but there's a difference. It's pure cannabis, and then there's cannabis that has all kind of chemicals in it. So we're facing with people that are using cannabis and are going into these medically mental psychosis moments. Some of them are able to get out of them, some of them are not. Some of it is permanent. Some of it ends up being diagnosed as schizophrenia. And what I've noticed is that we have a lot of these individuals that are at the jail that have just been sitting there. I came across 2 myself, and then while I was visiting the jail recently, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to one of my clients, and another gentleman had to, you know, was waiting for me and came in and said, you know, I've been trying to reach you, and told me what he had going on and gave me his paperwork. And he had been sitting there for over a year for something that was a misdemeanor, and had evaluation after evaluation after evaluation, and absolutely, you know, nothing was done. He's still sitting there. And I say that that's a legal issue that we have, because what happens is, and, you know, I hate that, you know, Judge Osborne is not on the bench anymore. He's senior judge, but that was his baby. That was his thing. He made a calling to address it, because they slipped through the cracks. And when they slip through the cracks, we all suffer as a community, because we don't know what to do with them. We don't know how to address it. And so we just send them right back out to reoffend and come right back without addressing it. And so I would say that's one of the major legal issues that we are facing in this community.
Thank you. Attorney Geoffroy, would you like to chime in on that and address another legal issue that we're facing right now?
Absolutely. And I'd start by echoing what Stephanie said. Mental illness is a tremendous issue, and there is no larger population of mentally ill folks in the Alcovey than it's sitting in our jails. And that is absolutely a legal issue. What kind of care are they getting there? And that affects folks of all races. It is a major issue. There are so many things. One thing that it has made, I think, a lot of citizens hyper aware of the judicial branch of government is the removal of the Confederate monument in Newton County. And this has made a lot of people who didn't know who the judges were, didn't know how the courts work, all of a sudden take a look and say, wait a second, this is an issue that matters to me. Who's going to decide it? And all of a sudden they realize it's going to be a judge that, you know, they'd blindly been filling out a ballot on and never thinking too much about. So those kinds of issues, an issue like that, and an issue, you know, Kevin talked a little while ago about justice and the grace that you need on the bench. You know, having a diverse bench, sometimes it's not the judge that you're before, but having that diverse set of judges, you know, that I'm sure Judge Hart can talk about being a part of, allows the judges to communicate and interact with other judges of a diverse background. So it may not be that, oh, we need an African-American judge for this issue, but just, you know, having someone who is amongst a diverse group and can ask for and get, even without asking for, lots of diverse points of view is tremendous on an issue like that. And you think about the idea of young African-American folks accused of crime, young immigrants accused of crime, going to a courthouse with a Confederate monument out front, standing in front of, you know, a bench that is all white, and prosecutors that are overwhelmingly white as well. And it is so difficult to give those folks, especially the younger ones, the courage to trust the system and to be totally honest like we know they need to be to try to get what they help. And a lot of times it isn't a black or white crime issue, pardon the pun, but it is a mental health issue. It is a drug addiction issue. It is a family violence issue. So having that diversity on the bench affects more than just who's the judge I'm in front of. It affects the perception of who's getting justice in the alcove and the reality of who are our judges around? Who are they talking to? Who are they interacting with? Who are their peers? Who's going to tell them how things work at a different church than they go to, or a different neighborhood than they grew up in? And so that's why that diversity, in the greatest sense of the word, not just racial diversity, having males and females, having people from different work backgrounds, that's why it's so important. And I think the Confederate monument issue has really brought to head for a lot of people, wait a second, it matters who that judge is. I never really cared until today.
Attorney Slaton, you're a native of Newton County as well, and so you have the opportunity to just see how the county has changed. What is another issue that you see that has plagued our community right now?
Yeah, it's interesting that you would pose that question along the lines of being a native and seeing growth. I lived away for about 15 years or so, and primarily in the DC, Maryland area, and a couple of years also in Pittsburgh, but I've been back for about 12, maybe a little more than that, about 12 years or so now. And so we've definitely experienced a lot of growth. And to the extent that we have, there's Western Newton County, which is basically a whole new county practically. And it comes up that way in terms of discussions about growth and revitalization, as well as, unfortunately, there has been to some extent some targeting because of the concentration and density that has happened on the west side of the county. It happens to be primarily comprised of a lot of individuals who, some of them Michael spoke of, individuals who have immigrated here, not necessarily just from other countries, but we've got a lot of people who've settled here from the Northeast and elsewhere. Interestingly, when I was interviewing for summer positions in law school, I was meeting with associates, and one's from New Jersey, and this was, 10 plus years ago. And I was telling her I'm from Covington. She's like, oh yeah, my parents are getting ready to move to Covington, and my aunt already moved there. And I'm like, to Covington? Are you serious? But turns out there was some active targeting of recruitment and development in certain communities, and some of those whole communities have relocated to some extent. But along those lines, there are issues of, I think, smart growth. Some of those developments were rapidly put up and just kind of, houses put on top of each other. You don't necessarily have that same growth in other areas of the county, which aren't necessarily the same demographic. Then also in the center part of the county or closer to the city, we've got issues of displacement, and we're starting to experience gentrification in our hometown. So that creates issues of, people losing their homes, homes being condemned, issues of people, having to, face what leverage do they have and what pursuits do they have, perhaps for an injunction to come to the court system to stop an action or halt an action so that there can be accurate or more detailed studies. So we've got a variety of those sorts of issues in addition to everything else that Stephanie and Michael have identified. And those are things that people don't necessarily think about, but those are critical issues for us, especially as we've got so much growth coming to our county from other areas, Facebook, et cetera.
So you guys brought up some really great issues that we are definitely facing right now. Judge Hart, I'm going to turn to you. What is the role of the judge when it comes into playing with those issues that they're discussing?
Well, I agree that all of the with all of the things that have been said by the earlier participants, the judge is like the referee and the decision maker. And if you assume that attorneys come before the bench or defendants come before the bench, and there are two sides or more than one side to an issue, the judge listens to the arguments and the evidence and how it is portrayed on the issue, and then makes a determination as to how they interpret the law. The word interpret has meaning. And so a judge, for example, in Newton County, who is hearing a zoning dispute or a business issue or a defendant's issue, will listen to the evidence or the arguments that are presented by opposing counsel and will bring his or her background, knowledge of the community, knowledge of the people, biases, if you will, about the people or the community or the section of the community that the proponents are from, or even the people that they play on the golf course with, as opposed to the person who they may not be a part of that community. And that framework comes to their decision-making process. But ultimately, the judge determines based on his or her knowledge of the law and the arguments that have been presented, makes a decision as to in favor of one plaintiff or another in the case of civil cases, plaintiffs or defendants, and in the cases of criminal law, whether or not there has been sufficient evidence to determine the defendant's guilt or innocence. And when it comes to weighing that, it's definitely not just the law, but the judge's application of the facts to the law based on their own knowledge of the law, but based on their experiences and background as well.
Thank you. Attorney Lindsey, so the issues that were brought up, and you definitely hit the nail on the head when you talked about mental illness, and you talked about Judge Osborne's role as on the bench. What are some other courts that we have that addresses some of those legal issues that we're facing today?
Well, in our circuit, we have the Veterans Court, which was led by Judge Johnson. And we also have a parental responsibility court, and then we have drug court. And drug court is led by Judge Wynn. And what I want to echo as relates to those courts and some of the other court issues that we have is what Judge Hart just said, and I'm gonna stress it because it's the bias. It's a bias. It is important for people in the community to know that when you are a judge, the judge listens to the facts and the judge applies the facts to the law the way he or she sees it, period. And when they do that, they take a bias with them. And you can't tell me at all that we all have a little bit of bias in us. So to sit here and say that, you're not going to have a bias on the bench is just a lie. The bottom line is it comes with the territory. So, you see cases all the time where, like I think Mr. Ward had mentioned earlier, when you have a Black kid from, let's say, Settlers Grove that has marijuana, and then you have, the white kid from East Side that has marijuana, and you see how that's handled differently. Unfortunately, it is. And I don't believe that every case should be handled the same way, because as people know, I don't believe in cookie cutter justice. I think that you should look at each and every case on an individual basis and look at the facts and look at the reasoning why the person did what they did. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes we have to, as attorneys, really stress that to judges that do not want to hear it. All they hear is, you know, this kid here from this area had this, likely going to sell it, probably wasn't just using it. But then you have this kid over here from, you know, another area of town that is white, that had, you know, the same amount of marijuana, but he's just using it. I mean, and that's the reality everywhere you go. You know, we are now in a position now where we are dealing a lot with the pills. And so it's not even marijuana, which a lot of people don't know that there's a distinction between marijuana and a Xanax, okay? Xanax is a felony. Marijuana less than an ounce is a misdemeanor. And in most cases, in some of the areas in Georgia, it's not even illegal anymore. They decriminalized it. But the bottom line is, you know, you have more children that are white that are doing the prescription pills and getting the prescription pills because they cost more money than the marijuana. So when you have judges that, you know, are on the bench and they relate to, you know, that kid that's, you know, from a good home, got two parents, you know, they golf buddies with their neighbor or whatever the case may be, yeah, he's going to get a lighter sentence. And the reality of it is, you know, you have to take in consideration, and I like what I think is Michael that said it earlier, the diversity, because you know what, you may have a judge that's there that's hearing this case that has a background, that's familiar with how this kid grew up and is willing to come and say, hey, you know what, this kid, you know, yeah, he had it on him. Yeah, he doesn't live in the best part of town, but you know, he's making good grades. He's striving. He wants to get out. He wants to break that generational curse. He wants to go off to college. We don't want this to affect him. So, you know, you have that camaraderie among the bench. And I believe that we had that in the Al Kirby circuit. You could clearly see that the judges in our circuit, at least most of the judges in our circuit, were able to talk to one another, communicate, and clearly had great relationships. And I think that that's important. And you can't have that if you have 5 judges and all 5 of the judges are white males in their 60s from the South.
Now, Michael, that takes me to a post that you did when we were promoting this event. The caption was, so what if all the judges on the bench are white? Can you chime in on that particular topic and what Attorney Lindsey just said?
Yeah, and not just white, but white males. You know, does it really matter? And I hear from a lot of people that what matters is the most qualified candidate. You know, so you have one opening and you need the most qualified candidate. Why should it matter what color that person is or whether they're male or female? Let's just go get the best person. And on the micro level, on the level of each position, that is true. But what is so, and that's the difficulty of diversity. You want to get the best candidate every single time. But then when you look at a bench, the Alcovy has 5 Superior Court judges. You go to larger areas in Atlanta, you're talking about, you know, 20 or 50. Does it matter if every single one of them is a white male in his 60s? And I think it does. And the reason is because of those diversity of experiences. And it is about having some folks maybe not from the South. Diversity of practice background. You know, I think it's very important that we have, you know, Kevin Gooch on this who does transactional work. So it's not just about some trial attorneys. We have attorneys from the practice here in Newton County, but we also have some from outside. So it really is about that. And it's about the perception of justice and the idea that when people look at the bench and they look at a picture of our 5 judges in the Alcovy, that they see something that fairly represents where they are. That doesn't mean that we always have one black judge because we are 20% African American, you know? It means that there are men and women on the bench. It means that there are minorities on the bench. We have a Hispanic population. We have an Asian population. So that representation, when you look at the whole, matters. And I want to say one other thing in a different interpretation of your question about how the judiciary affects the community. And that is off the bench. And part of what we talked about is the tragic loss of Judge Johnson, who I know was a tremendous mentor to us. I think the biggest impact he had didn't come when he had the robe on. He was a volunteer. He served. He started a mentoring program. He worked with me at the Boys and Girls Club, got me involved with the Boys and Girls Club. And he and Michelle both are on every single committee. It's hard to find something they didn't do. And that's tremendous, because the role of a judge is you get so much respect. You get this title. All the attorneys have to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, to you, whether they like what you say or not. What are you going to do with that? And he did so much with it. And it's so important that we get judges that are community minded and that can reach out to all our communities, especially some of the communities that have been underserved in the past. So that's another reason diversity is important, is to have those judges to reach out to communities that haven't had representation in any of the branches of government and say, hey, we're going to start a program up over here, or you're an important part of our community. And Judge Johnson, I think, lived that so well. And I really hope that all of the judges we have in the future in the Alcovy and at every level do that. And it's so important, not just what you do when you have the robe on.
So that leads me to my next question. Kevin Gooch, I'm going to start with you on this one. So while judges are expected to be fair and impartial, should we be looking at their memberships in organizations or their political affiliations, or how they've even voted in the past, and other aspects of their professional and personal life when we're looking to the criteria of a judge and who we want on our bench?
Well, I think the most important thing that you should look at, of course, is whether they are a part of the community, right? I think that is number one, because folks that come from the community will exhibit, in my view, grace, mercy, and an ability to relate to the community that they come from. I think oftentimes in the justice system, there's this us versus them mentality, and you can dehumanize the them and treat them less than human. And when you come from that community and you're going to see these people in church on Sunday, or you're going to be in the grocery store with them, and you really are out in the community and you get to know those stories of this kid is working hard, got great grades, and on his way to Stanford or on her way to UGA, and she just made a mistake. I think that helps you relate better, and you will show that grace and mercy and not sort of destroy their lives because they made a mistake, which you may be more prone to do if you don't know them, and you can have that us versus them mentality, right? And so I think the number one thing that you need to look at is their connections to the community and the community that they're serving, to make sure that they have those connections. I do think it is important to look at those memberships and the sort of background, because again, when you are interpreting the law, you view them through the prism of your life's experiences, right? And those organizations that you're part of, you know, your sort of political affiliations and other things that you do, even though you're not supposed to look at them because they're supposed to be nonpartisan. But we all know that you bring that. And I think Stephanie mentioned this earlier, like your bias. You have your bias because you view it through your life's experience. And that's just what we all do. And so, yeah, some of those things can illuminate what that person is likely, how that person is likely to interpret the law based on some of those things that they've done in the past and those things that they have, that they've been a part of in the past. And so, yeah, you need to pay attention to those things when you're looking for someone to be judged. I do want to piggyback on one thing that that Michael said earlier, which I think was a great point, and it can be unpacked a little bit, right? Is that it's so easy for people to say, let's pick the most qualified. Well, what does that mean? What is qualified, right? I may, you know, someone that is a part of the least of these or the most vulnerable of society may say, I think you're more qualified if you made B's in law school, but I know you're going to be fair, as opposed to you made all A's in law school and you aren't going to be fair. So who determines? And so, I mean, I think that's a discussion that needs to be had, right? Like, what does it take to be a good judge? Is it just great grades, or is it that fairness component where you're supposed to apply justice blindly and not treat different groups of people differently? And so, I mean, I think that is a very, very important point to think about and to focus on when you hear someone saying that it's who has the best qualifications.
Navan, can you add to that point?
Yeah, sure. When we look at the position of a judge, they hold great power over the people in the community. I mean, when they come in the courtroom, what do? We all have to rise. I don't even do that for my mama or my wife. Maybe I should, but you know, we look to elect or appoint a judge. When we do that, that's a serious decision. And so since we're not actually able to get into someone's mind, we have to look at things that will give us some insight into who they are. I'm a strong believer in what comes out of a person's mouth definitely is an indication of what's in their heart. And when we look at a person's personal organizational affiliations or other things of that matter, that can be a substitute for what someone is saying. And obviously, if they're part of groups that have traditionally had some type of prejudice or oppressed a certain group of people, what would you expect for them to do when you get on the bench? Conversely, someone, as Kevin said, that's from the community, someone that you see, you know, or are part of organizations that have a good and righteous meaning in it. It can be anything from Boys and Girls Club, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, to the NAACP. You know, these are not in any way, shape, or form things that you will know for sure how someone will ultimately vote or someone will personally be, because there, I'm sure, certainly people who, after they get the judge's robe on for whatever reason, may not necessarily rule in the same way that you have known them to be in the past. And so it's kind of looking at a crystal ball. But when you are looking at a person in that position of going there, of going to the bench, you obviously would want to look at some of those things and weigh them accordingly, depending on how well do you know that particular candidate or that particular appointee, and what that particular candidate appointee has said, done, potentially ruled in the past, or again, some of the other things that would give you insight as to what he or she may do on the court. And having that knowledge, if it's an elected position, it allows you to better utilize your bully pulpit at the election booth.
Wayne Kendall, I'm going to ask you to chime in on that matter as well. Can you briefly chime in on that?
Yes. I think it's of utmost importance to know what a particular candidate for a judgeship might have done in his past in terms of memberships in political organizations, political parties, etc. Because I think that's instructive on that person's future and how they will view their role as a judge. Back a few years ago, there was an individual by the name of Michael Boggs, who's now on the Supreme Court, who was up for a federal judgeship. And we, when I say we, I mean Advocacy for Action, we challenged his ability to become a federal judge based on some of the things that he had done in the past in terms of his support of outing abortion doctors, for instance, and some of his other votes while he had been in the Georgia legislature. And because we highlighted those things in his past, he ultimately did not win approval by the United States Senate to become a federal judge. He later did become a Supreme Court justice. But those things that we highlighted made it clear that in many respects, because of the issues that he would have to be ruling on as a federal judge, that he may not have been the best qualified person for that position. And the point that Kevin Gooch just made about qualifications, that, you know, it's always used against us as minorities, that we're not exactly qualified. Just a few weeks ago, we had a meeting with the three co-chairs of the Judicial Nominating Commission. And the subject of the meeting was two things. Number one, the composition of the JNC itself, and their lack of appointments of minorities, qualified minorities, to some of the positions that have been coming up. And the response that they gave with regards to appointments was that, oh, we're always looking for qualified, quote unquote, candidates. Well, here are the facts. Back in 2003, we had a governor by the name of Sonny Perdue. During his time in office, Sonny Perdue appointed around 80 some odd judges. And of those 80 some odd appointments, 6.3% were minorities. 12.66% were females. Then 8 years after that, we had another governor by the name of Nathan Deal. Nathan Deal appointed 17.42% of his appointments to minority persons. And then he appointed 30.3% of his appointments to females. And now we have Governor Kemp, who's been in office 2.5 years roughly. And his appointments, a year and a half since 2019. Since he's been in office, 25% of his appointments have been minorities. And he has bested everybody with 60% of his appointments being female. But here's the kicker. These three governors have appointed 119 persons to the Superior Court bench in the 17.5 years since 2003. Of those 119 persons, 109 of those persons have been white, but 92% of all Superior Court appointments have been white persons. And of the 10 that have been minorities, 8 have been minority females, and only 2 have been minority males. 2 out of 119 over 17.5 years. Now, when you consider the fact that 55% of the persons that make up the population of the prisons in Georgia are black males, and only 2% of the persons appointed to Superior Court judgeships have been black males, you see a damning statistic that is indicative of institutional racism at its finest. And that's what we are up against as minority lawyers in this state. So yes, a judge's membership, history, party affiliations, all of that matters in determining whether or not these judges are going to be fair on the bench.
Thank you. Now, how can we ensure that more minority judges are appointed or elected? Judge Hart, I know that you've worked a lot with Wayne Kendall with Advocacy for Action on that particular issue. What are some things that we can do to ensure that there are more minority judges appointed or elected?
Well, I think that the first thing is consideration of who is appointed. Who is elected, because it is the governor who makes the appointment. And one of the governors did outline who he considered for judgeships. And one of the first things was that they had to be a member of the Federalist Society. So I think attorneys, especially black attorneys, know that that's a code word. I'm not sure how many black students or black attorneys are even members of the Federalist Society, because their conservative, strict constructionist view of the Constitution. So when you talk about qualifications and you have a governor saying that that is one of their main criteria, then automatically you get less than, almost less than 2% of the appointees. Wayne told you how many minority and Black appointments there were, but if you broke them down by governor and you see who has been appointed to the bench, and that being one of the qualifying factors, you understand why our statistics are like they are. But people can, one of the advantages of elections, and we encourage people to attorneys to run, is that you do get a chance to ask the questions. And we often ask the question, how would they rule in a certain case, which judges, judicial candidates can't answer. But you can really ask them about their participation in community activities, as we pointed out. You can ask them how they feel about certain social issues. You can ask them about their affiliations in the community. And forums, we've tried to, at advocacy, we did sponsor forums, and our community organizations have gotten in the habit of actually sponsoring judicial forums. In most circuits, and I bet the Alcova is not very different, very few times do you have forums where judicial candidates actually are brought before the community so that the community can ask them questions about opinions, not as to how they would rule on cases, but about the state of society in general, or what their affiliations are. And we also find that community education is the key. Judicial ballots are down ballots. Most people, in many instances, don't even reach the issue of a judge because most judges are unopposed. So they don't go down that far on the ballot. They are not aware, because there are so few judicial elections, that a judge can be elected. So to the extent that judicial forums highlight that particular race in a community, you can bring to bear the community's input into who actually is chosen. The other thing is educating the community about what judges actually do. Most people only think of judges, and our community is really impacted by judges in criminal defense issues. So answering questions such as how do you feel about diversion programs, recidivism, those kinds of things will get a feel for how the candidate actually feels.
Gooch, can you add to that particular matter?
Yeah, I am. First of all, those statistics from Wayne were alarming. I did not know that. Those were incredibly alarming statistics. But I do think the way you get more minority judges on the bench, one, you got to vote. I mean, we got to vote. I don't know what the statistics are, but I would assume a majority of judges end up on the bench through an appointment, and then they just continue to win their elections over time because it's so hard to unseat an incumbent judge. So voting matters. And on the federal level and the state level, it really, really matters. And it gets frustrating when you hear people focus on sort of nonsense when it comes to picking a presidential candidate, when it's not like the Supreme Court is in the balance and the federal bench is in the balance. Why are we worried about nonsense? Because what it is it's a lack of education, right? We have to educate our folks on why this stuff is so important and why they should be focused on it and not focus on the nonsense about, what some candidate did, on TikTok or something like that. And so there needs to be a very, very intentional program around educating young people and educating voters on the importance of the judiciary. Again, it is a co-equal branch of government, but it does not get the attention. Like, people treat the sort of presidency or the governorship as like it's the silver bullet and it's the end all be all. but those folks get checked by the judiciary, and we don't give enough attention to that. So I think it takes, forums like these, and this group needs to make sure that we're sort of disciples out there preaching the importance of the judiciary so folks will actually pay attention, and also connecting the dots between why if you vote for the governor, that impacts the judiciary, and why it is important, if you don't like anything else about a presidential candidate, who they will put on the Supreme Court can have a 50-year impact on your daily lives. So it's so much bigger than just this 4 years, because it matters on the long term through the judiciary. When you put a bunch of 45-year-olds on the federal bench, you're going to be impacted by that for 30, 40 years. And so we need to educate folks on the importance of voting, and making noise when a judicial appointment comes up, to make sure that, again, to unpack that point earlier about qualifications, is not just about the grades in law school, and it's not just about who was at some large firm, and it's not just about, who knows who, but a component of qualifications is fairness, the ability to relate to the community and those that come before them. We need to make sure we make a lot of noise about that as an equally important qualification as the grades you made in law school.
I agree. So Navan, I just want to address one of the points that Kevin brought up. As we stated earlier, this is not just a local issue, but like I said, this is something that plagues the state, on a federal level, on the Supreme Court level. Can you address that as well, and how we can ensure that we're bringing minorities to the bench?
Sure. Well, we can just look at the numbers, and just to piggyback off of what Kevin just said, I wish it was 45-year-olds that are being appointed. We're looking more at 35-year-olds, which definitely, whether it's 50 or 60 years, it's definitely our lifetime and our children's lifetime of changing the dynamic of the rulings that have already taken place, or reversing rulings that have already taken place. And it's not just at the Supreme Court level. We're talking about literally the district court level, which in the same way as a trial court has probably the most important impact on the common person. That's where we're seeing a lot of it, at least the past 3 years appointments occur, and the appellate courts in general. In fact, more appellate court appointees have been made under this current presidential administration. Over 50% of the appellate appointees have been made from this administration. So damage is already done, and being able to reverse that trend is something that has to be of utmost importance. And when we look at, again, the numbers locally of the racial disparity, when we look at appointments under President Obama, in his 8 years, 17.93% were Black, compared to under Trump administration, 3.96%. When we look at Latinx, under Obama, 9.7% versus 3.9%. We look at Asian Americans, it's about the same, 5.7 to 5.7. Native Americans, 1% under Obama, 0% under Trump. Two or more races, 2.4 versus 0% under Trump. And when we look at men and women, under Obama, we have 41%, 42% of women versus 58% men. Under Trump, it's only 23% women, and 76% men. And so, and it's actually white men. And so the question of, what can we do to reverse that is certainly, there's no magic bullet to it. Vote. We have to vote the correct people in, that's going to be able to stand up to any person or any party or any movement that wants to continue the numbers that we see here. And you got to, again, be educated and know that it's typically the senators in each state that normally gives a blue slip to say yes or no to what federal level, the federal court appointments that would go to the next level as far as the president making the actual appointment. Over the last several years, it's those two Senate positions have been held by Republicans. This year, with everything going on, there could be a tremendous opportunity for there to be two Democrats, or at least one Democrat that would hold one of those positions that would have a legitimate way to allow if President Biden or Vice President Biden is able to win, to allow people who look more like the community here in Georgia to be on the bench. We have two races. One's a special election. Reverend Raphael Warnock is running, and he's certainly made the statements and has the wherewithal of the importance of the problems with the judiciary, federal judiciary, and he certainly is someone who everyone should know about. There's actually going to be a meet and greet with him this week sometime. I can put it inside the chat for you to take a look at and get to know him better. And then on the other election is Oscoff going against Purdue. We know what the incumbents have done. We don't have to guess. We see what they have done. And so I believe that both would be a better gateway to help change the judiciary, federal judiciary here and in Georgia.
LeKeyia, if I could comment quickly.
Yes, please.
One of the things that I've seen from both the governor and at the federal level that I haven't liked relates to an earlier question you had, and that is that the membership in different groups, and you discussed earlier at both the state and federal level, the use of Federalist Society as some sort of litmus test, and this is the group of people that we're looking for. I think that's the wrong approach. Yes, we do look at the memberships people have, but there's no one group you should have to be a member of to be a gateway to the bench. At the same token, no one group should disqualify you, I guess with some exception, but I'm recalling Judge Dax Lopez, who is a great judge we have in DeKalb County, who had a nomination to the federal bench, but was seen as unfit because he was a member of a minority elected officials group for Latino elected officials, and he's a native Puerto Rican. And so that disqualification I felt like was uncalled for and unfair. He should stand on his record as a judge and his membership to many groups, minority and otherwise. So no one group should put you in or keep you out.
That's a great point, Michael. Thank you. And Michael, if you could just address what can we do to get more minority judges appointed in this circuit and across the state? If you would like to touch on that for me.
Appointment's a tricky thing because it does all go through the governor's office here in Georgia. And I think for the regular non-lawyer citizens out there, we've heard it and we said it a few times, get out and vote, get out and be involved, meet the judicial candidates, meet the lawyers that are out there, and the people that you like and the people that represent and you think would do a good job as a judge, get out and support them early. Encourage them to do more positions. If they run for various elected positions, don't wait till they're ready to be a judge. Support them to be on the city council or the county commission or Board of Education or something else like that. And for those of us who are lawyers, we can write, and for non-lawyers as well, you can write letters of recommendation for candidates that you think should be appointed. You can get out and lobby if you do have some connections with people who are on the JNC that Wayne was talking about before. Those are the people that that have some influence over the governor. So it ultimately is going to come through the governor's mansion. But there are some things that you can do to get out and try to influence that as best you can. And I think that's getting to know and supporting the people that are going to make good judges.
And I'm glad you said that, because as a resource, we are going to post that information at the end of this discussion, just giving the community something to go by so that they can understand that they can be a part of this process and write to the JNC and to the governor's office to express their opinions about what they want on their particular bench when it comes to an appointment.
And LeKeyia, if I could just add one more point to that. When we, again, look at at least the federal level, and for that matter, the local level and appointments, it's incumbent upon us to be able to really make sure those that are going forward, to identify those, encourage those attorneys and judges who we know will be good to go forward and seek some of these positions. Sometimes they may not feel like they're qualified. I don't believe that. Particularly compared to some of the people who've been appointed over the last 2 or 3 years. One thing to help that is judicial training. There's actually one this week for federal judgeships. And there's actually a questionnaire that gives a pretty good idea of the different things that a nominee would need to be aware of. I will circulate, I get that to you and circulate that questionnaire. If there are people that anyone knows that are interested in or would be a good federal judge nominee, let me know so we can get them in touch with the people who are training, so that when they put that nomination in, they'll be well prepared and to have success to be able to get through.
Thank you. Attorney Lindsey, I know that as a pillar of this community, you are always bombarded with questions from the community about, who should I vote for? What am I supposed to be doing when I go to the ballot box? What are some of those things that you tell the individuals that you encounter that are just unsure of what to do and who to elect at that position?
Well, I'm a very candid person, so I'm going to tell them exactly what the particular candidate has done or the particular judge has done. I do things a little different. I'm going to first say I believe in voting. I think that everybody knows that I preach voting all the time, but I also believe in accountability. And I feel like we as Black attorneys have dropped the ball. We're not doing what we need to be doing. And even white attorneys who believe in the process are not doing what they need to be doing. We're not being truthful to the community about what's going on the bench, period. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for it, but the bottom line is I cannot stand to be in a room and everybody talks bad about a particular judge and how horrible this judge is and how unfair this judge is and how prejudiced this judge is. And then when it comes time to run against that judge, nobody says anything's cricket. Or you do get a candidate that runs and then it's still crickets. You don't have anybody behind you backing you up when you're running. The bottom line is, I think that we have to be more candid. We have to be more open and honest to the community about what's going on the bench, period. When I have clients, families that come in here and they're fussing about why is it that their son or their daughter is being treated like this, I said, it's your fault. It's your fault. Did you vote? Did you bring anybody else to the poll with you when you voted? When you didn't do it, so it's your fault. We have right now an election going on for the I think it's Judge Benton seat. It's a runoff. How many people knew in our community that there's a runoff going on? There's early voting going on right now. How many people know about it? Okay. How many people have gone out and voted? But we sit and we trying to watch my language. We sit and we complain about what's going on, but we're not getting out there as attorneys and telling the community what is going on. We got 2 candidates that are running for judge right now for the Alcovey Circuit, 2. We got Stansford running, we got Foster running. How many people have looked at that information to see what they're individuals are about? They're both 2 white males, but that's what we deal with. That's what we stuck with. You still have to look at the candidates that are out there, and you still have to determine which one is the best one that's going to respect your interests. Period. How many people have done that? So, you know, I'm probably not the best person to answer the question because I get a little bit fired up about it. I get pissed about it because I hate it. It drives me crazy. And we have dropped the ball. Black attorneys and those attorneys that are not Black that believe in the process, you dropped the ball. And I'm going to continue to say it. And I've said it over and over again, you dropped the ball. Get the information out there. Be truthful about what we have going on the bench, period. And then we can affect change. But if we're all sitting here trying to get along just to get along, we are doing a disservice to our community. We are doing a disservice to the citizens that are facing these judges every day, because we don't have to face them criminally, at least most of us don't, but our families do and our clients do. And it's not a pretty sight sometimes when you see it. And it's not just in the Al-Kobe circuit, we go everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's not just the criminal cases, it's the divorce cases, it is the personal injury cases, it is on all. So I think that we have to step it up a little bit more, do more, get the education out there more, tell people about what advocacy and action is, because we've talked about it several times, but people out there don't know what the heck that is. They don't know what it is. They don't know that they can donate to it. And that's another thing. We need to remind people that if you could spend $10 on a meal at Chick-fil-A or $30 on your nails, you dang on sure can spend $30 donating to a cause that's going to help you out in the future and help your family out in the future, period.
I agree. We are going to post Advocacy for Action's web link on our page as well, so that individuals can see that and click on that for additional information, because obviously this topic, we could go on for hours with this, but we do have a couple of questions from the audience, and I just want to go ahead and address a couple of those questions. Gail, if you could tell us, the audience wants to know, where does the governor get the options for appointments? How do they get that information? How does that get to the judge, to the governor?
I can answer that. When there's a vacancy on the bench, either by way of death or resignation or some other reason, there's a statute that lists 7 causes by which a governor can appoint a person to the bench. Typically, it's by resignation. There's basically an unwritten rule in the state of Georgia that if you are appointed to a judgeship, which 60% of the judges who take office for the first time are, then there's an unwritten rule that you will resign your seat prior to the end of your term to allow the governor to replace you with an appointment. So there is this organization called the Judicial Nominating Commission, which is appointed by the governor. It's not a legislatively created body. It's created only by executive order. Each governor since Jimmy Carter has appointed a judicial nominating commission. Typically, they have about 20 to 24 people on that commission. Currently, the one that's constituted by Governor Kemp has 3 co-chairs. There are 11 white males, 6 white females, 1 Asian female, and 2 black males, no black females on that commission. They determine who gets appointed to whatever judgeship the governor has a right by law to fulfill. One of the white females, this is the irony of it, in order to be a judge in Georgia, you have to have been practicing for a minimum of 6 years. You have to have been a member of the bar for 6 years. There's one member of the JNC who graduated from Emory Law School in 2017. She is picking judges for the Supreme Court and will be picking a judge for the Supreme Court for Judge Benham's seat. And she's only been practicing law for 3 years. Probably has never tried a case. Probably has never even been in a courtroom, because I think her practice is something that does not involve courtroom work. But she's on the Judicial Nominating Commission, as opposed to all of the black females who are out there who are retired judges like Judge Hart and other judges who would bring a wealth of experience to that position. Again, what I consider to be institutional racism. So that's how the government gets to appoint people to vacant judgeships.
Let me weigh in on that particular issue.
Yes.
I think that we have to understand that the appointment of judges is a political process. And that may be one way that circuits like the Colby Circuit can impact who is appointed to their circuit. And that is that no governor is going to appoint anyone that they think will have a contested election or a hard election, not be reelected in the community. And so from a personal experience, I can tell you that state representatives and senators have the governor's ear on that. So that, yes, minority judges, black attorneys have dropped the ball in terms of intersecting with that political sphere to let the state representative or the state senator know that this is not a person that we want to be in our circuit. Even writing letters to they publish who is seeking an appointment, writing letters to the JNC as to why this person would not be fit for the community. And it is black lawyers that must take the lead on doing this, because unless you bring to the community's attention why this person or this attorney would not be a good judge in your community, and it's all local, and get it to the elected representatives and the community leaders who can have a voice with the governor, that person just goes in and is considered to be a done deal because of the power of the incumbency. But that is why advocacy exists. We've taken some hits. People have called us radical and all sorts of things, but we're just trying to make this democratic process more democratic. And we really need attorneys who want to be judges, who practice before judges, to educate the community and to get some community activism when you are looking at an appointment in your community. And you can make a difference.
Michael, can you add to that point really quickly for me?
Well, I think what she said at the end about making a difference is just so important. And I think to bring it back a little bit to the Alcovy, there is a lot of frustration about what we have, about the governor being able to make an appointment to fill the seat that was, I think Judge Johnson played such a vital role, not just because he was our only black judge, but because he was such a pioneer, being the first black integrated student at Newton High School, first black lawyer, first black judge, and he was such a leader. So, you know, when you look at what we have, it is important that we all try to push and play a part in this process. Get in touch with people that we know, write letters to people we know, and make the point that we need a judge that fairly represents all the people in Newton County and Walton County that's going to do this. And we haven't touched on this issue yet, but in terms of diversity, practice area diversity, we have judges now. We have such an overwhelming prosecutors bench right now. I think we now have, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, 3 of 4 judges were, 3 right now of the current 4 judges were former district attorneys, the elected district attorney. So you have an extreme prosecutor slant right now. And that's not to say those aren't fair judges as individuals, but they have that bias like we were talking about. So where's the business judge? You know, where's the judge who has come from transactional world, who's done criminal defense or family law? 3 of our 4 judges have never had a private client. They've never collected a bill. They've never done any of that. And attorneys' fees are important issues in civil cases. So we need diversity on our bench, not just in terms of color and sex, but practice area, because tremendous injustice is going to happen to the criminal defendants of the Alcovy Circuit if we just continue to say that our bench is the next step for the district attorney and continue to use that as the only basis of qualification, like Kevin said before. What does qualification really mean? And we can't just say being DA qualifies you for judge, so let's just keep promoting all of those DAs. That's not a good way to create a bench that reflects your community or that understands what justice is from everyone's point of view.
And Gail, you know, you were very familiar with Judge Johnson and his legacy. What are some of the qualities that we need to look for in his replacement that he had and established on that bench and that he brought to the bench in terms of his experience and his background? What are some of those qualities that we need to look for in our next judge?
Sure. Certainly part of it Michael kind of spoke to because he didn't come from a prosecutorial background. He came from largely, I mean, he did some criminal defense work. He certainly had a business background, so civil practice. So he was primarily of a civil practice background, but also courts understood criminal practice. So from an experience standpoint, he had some well-roundedness or some exposure across the board. And certainly that's helpful when we talk about, as Michael said, the diversity of practice area. In fact, I think he might have majored, I think he graduated from the business school. So he came from even a business background, even when he went on, before he went on to law school. And from a general standpoint, certainly someone who is of the community, who believes in the community, who you know, doesn't just go to work, but they are about the community. He was very active, as Michael said. I think kind of probably, he said, got him involved with the Boys and Girls Club in his classic sort of way. You know, Judge Johnson is always making things happen behind the scenes, and we'll leave it at that, right, Michael? But because of his love of people, and particularly because he embodied, you know, the scripture, Micah 6:8 says, you know, seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. And he was definitely, obviously was a man of faith, but he was a humble person. I mean, you wouldn't hear him, you know, shouting about or raving about the things that he did in the community. But he was always making things happen behind the scenes for people, and certainly for people who came before him and appeared before him in his court. You know, as we talked about being fair, you know, and having an understanding of where people come from throughout the county, different backgrounds, knowing that an East Side student and a Settlers Grove student would have fair consideration, not necessarily a cookie cutter outcome, as Stephanie pointed out, but a fair outcome, not any sort of bias because one came from one location, one came from another, but certainly speaking to that individual. And certainly, you know, he wouldn't bite his tongue either when, you know, when needed, to, you know, people who were appearing before him, you know, a dad on the bench, you know, to the people who were appearing before him, you know, as actual plaintiffs or defendants or whatever the case may be, as well as attorneys. You know, he was always in that role of pursuing the greatest good and using his gifts for the betterment of all, you know. So that meant justice in all regards. That meant being merciful in all regards. That meant being humble in all regards. And so certainly, you know, Judge Johnson is one of a kind. And we thoroughly miss him. But certainly he left big shoes to fill. But he possessed characteristics that plenty of people do possess, and plenty of people can embrace when they make a conscious effort to do so. And so I think more than anything else, he had a conscious purpose. He was very clear on his life purpose. He walked in his purpose, and he was purposeful in everything that he did. So someone who would be purposeful about administering justice from the bench in a fair manner, in a merciful manner, is someone that this county and the circuit rather would definitely benefit from.
Don't forget the one-liners. You got to have good one-liners.
Oh yeah. I don't know if anyone can ever replace his natural wit.
Yes.
You know, that would certainly help. But you know, again, he's, for many of us, he feels irreplaceable. But certainly, again, there are characteristics that he certainly embodied that others, if they so choose, some would possess. But then again, if they would be purposeful about administering justice fairly, then that would go a long way towards, you know, filling his shoes to some regard.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank each and every one of you for just educating the community on this particular topic. Like I said, there's a plethora of information that we could disseminate on this, and we could talk for hours. Obviously, it's something that's important, not just in the Alcovy circuit, but, you know, across the state, as, you know, each of you has said earlier. So thank each of you for participating. What we want to do at this time is just, you know, drive home a couple of points and what the community can do, because, you know, we talk a lot about attorneys being involved in this process and you know, what the judge looks like, you know, but as a community, you know, member, what can I do to participate in this process, you know? And I want to just share a couple of points. So first of all, you can ask the governor to diversify the Judicial Nomination Committee. A lot was talked about in terms of the Judicial Nomination Committee. I believe Wayne Kendall gave us some statistics and said that there are only 2 African-American males on this particular panel of 20 people and no African-American females. You can actually write to the JNC and ask the governor to diversify the actual committee that nominates these individuals. The other thing is you can contact the JNC and ask if the nominee reflect the diversity of the circuit. Third, write the governor about the next appointment. You're his constituent. Your voice can be heard. You don't have to be an attorney to reach out to the governor's office, and we'll provide that information to you as well. But write the governor. Fourth, vote. You have to vote. I can't stress this enough. It's not important enough, it's just not good enough to vote for, you know, the commissioner or the Senate. You have to vote for those individual judges. You have to stop checking the ballots, because if you just check ballots, at that point, they think that they have some, you know, weight behind that name. You know, oh, well, you know, I don't need anybody running against me, because guess what? You know, I ran and I got all these nominations, I got all these ballots, I got all these elections. And so, you know, you have to actually take the time to vote. Stop skipping the judges' names. You have to actually be informed of who's on that ballot before you get to the ballot box. So just start to educate yourself about who's on the ballot and start looking at that judicial election as well. And last but not least, like Attorney Lindsey said, contribute to diverse candidates. It's not cheap running an election. And, you know, we want to get that information out to the individuals and to the community. And in order to do so, it costs money. You know, you see those nice flyers coming to your house, it's not free. It's not free. And so we want to just let you know that even if it's $5 or $10, if there's a candidate that you want to support, contribute to their candidacy, contribute to their elections. And what we have posted last is just some information for you to take down. We have the link to the governor's office in terms of getting his contact information, constituent services, the phone number, and where you can send your letters to, the JNC committee, and you can also write to the JNC committee. And we have presented Vincent Russo's information on here as well. And last but not least, the link for Advocacy for Action. If you want to know more about this organization and what they do in terms of advocating about the diversity on the bench and trying to get more minorities on the bench, you can definitely click on their link or go to their website to get some more information. So I want to end this by saying thank you all for logging in tonight. Thank each of my panelists for coming out here and just being prepared to discuss this topic. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I know the community does as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Be safe. Thanks for the
Good
opportunity.
night.
Bye-bye, everyone.
But get in good trouble.
That's right.
Good trouble.
Bye-bye.
Sign me up for the bad trouble.
But I like that bad trouble too. Just a little
Just a little, just a little.
bit.